All right. This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I'm Andrew Rigie, and I am very, very excited to have my guest here today, the Speaker of the New York City Council, Julie Menin. How's it going?
Thanks, Andrew, for having me. I love that you're doing this show. All things hospitality. It's fantastic.
I love it, right? The intersection of hospitality, politics.
Right.
So
what could be better?
And who better to speak with than you about all of this? I feel like we're so often, I see you, it's like meetings or big events. So this is very nice to be like in the studio.
Yeah.
And, so where to start? I guess my first question would be, people hear Speaker of the City Council and, they feel like, because it sounds like an important job, which it is, but what does the Speaker of the City Council actually do?
Well, the Speaker does a number of different things. First of all, we negotiate the budget with the mayor. So we close that budget at the end of June. We also have oversight over all of the city agencies. And for me, that role is very important. I served as commissioner of several New York City agencies. And so now to be on the other side, that oversight role is really important. It's about the checks and balances of government, making sure that the government agencies are functioning at the highest level and really making sure that the public, because of the hearings is really for the public to be able to air out any concerns or questions that they have as well. And then we do land use. So that is something that's an enormous function of the City Council. We approve various land use projects that are happening in districts. And it's really been a chance in this new iteration of the council to have a proactive vision around land use. So for example, we announced a proposal where we're building 100% affordable housing on top of a number of the New York City Public Library branches. We also announced that we're doing a small lots project where we mapped out every small lot across those cities as little vacant slivers. And we're trying to build 35,000 units of housing on those small lots.
We need lots of housing. So we're with you on that. So, with the City Council and small business, everybody talks about, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. They're so important just to kind of the social and cultural fabric of the city. But it's tough being a small business owner. And one of the reasons I think you do such a great job supporting them is because you have experience being a small business owner. And could you give me a little background? Because I've heard the story before, but you have like incredible experience. And I feel like you bring all these different types of experiences to your role as speaker.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate that. I mean, it was a long time ago. It was in 1999, just to date myself, a long time ago when I opened up my restaurant. It was called Vine. And it was a market. It was a restaurant with a large bar, and it was a catering space. I had been a lawyer working at a large law firm and then at a company for almost 6 to 7 years. And then I decided to leave the practice of law to open up my business. And I opened up Vine. It was located in the financial district, catty corner to the New York Stock Exchange. And when we opened, we were packed. There were not a lot of restaurants downtown. There certainly were very few markets. And so we really were very, very busy. And I was, like any small business owner will tell you, working night and day on my business. And then 2 years after I opened, 9/11 hit. And my business was completely decimated. All the windows were blown out when the second tower fell, and the white grayish ash covered all of my restaurant. And my husband was supposed to be at a meeting at the World Trade Center site that morning. So I was frantically trying to find him. Thankfully, he was okay. My parents live with us. My mother, we couldn't find till that afternoon. Thankfully, at the end of the day, she was all right. But that's really what propelled me into public service, because when my business was decimated and when the insurance companies, and I know you'll appreciate this, the insurance companies were saying, oh, we're here for you, Lower Manhattan, in your time of need. And our carrier, St. Paul's, actually had taken out a full page ad saying, we're here for you, Lower Manhattan. And when I decided to reopen my business, a Monday after September 11th, I reopened it because the New York Stock Exchange was reopening. And I thought, we're not going to basically be told that we're not going to reopen. And so I felt it was really important symbolically that if the stock exchange was reopening, we should try to reopen. With that said, we had no food deliveries. Only a couple of employees could come to work that day. We cooked pasta. We went from, I think we used to do 250 covers for lunch. We went to about 3 that day. But I thought it was important to do that. And our insurance carrier took the position that we were only entitled to 5 days of business interruption insurance. So that's how I got involved in public service. I started a not-for-profit organization called Wall Street Rising that was focused on helping other small businesses. We helped over 600 small businesses stay in Lower Manhattan. And then I served as a chair of the local community board, Board 1, for about 7 years.
Amazing. Well, it's such a powerful story and, interesting to see how people's journey begins, and how such a tragic happening, can result in someone really getting involved and then working to do so much good. And I can't help but mention talking about covers. You don't always sit down with an elected official. They're talking about restaurants, the number of covers they're doing and everything. So, I think it's those little things that also help inform, policy making and how you look at issues, how you think about them, how you consider them, and make policy.
Well, it's so true because I was thinking about this the other day, but after 9/11, and one of the things I did with Wall Street Rising is we advocated for the streets around the stock exchange, Broad Street, Exchange Place, to have outdoor tables and chairs, sort of the precursor, if you will, to outdoor dining. We urge that the city consider waiving the sidewalk cafe license fee, try to promote more businesses coming downtown. The city didn't end up completely waiving the fee, but it was something we had pushed for. But what they did do is they put out chairs and tables and all of that, and they're still out there today. I was actually just on Broad and Exchange the other day, and I saw, here are these tables and chairs that we had advocated for almost 25 years ago.
It's really amazing. Just even the through line there, talking about one crisis and then how kind of outdoor dining, and it's bigger than outdoor dining, but socialization and people coming together to socialize and also spend money and, move the economy. It's similar to another crisis, the pandemic, where outdoor dining obviously became such a lifeline. And then it became a way to help stimulate the economy, but also to bring people together and to socialize. And I think it's so important how food is so often in small businesses like restaurants are in that intersection of, politics and public policy and city planning.
Well, food unites us. It's something that brings us together. We celebrate some of our best and our worst moments around food. If you think about it, whether it's weddings, birthdays, all those celebrations, a date, anything like that. But then it's also when very sad, traumatic things happen, a funeral, other things like that. So food is so important to bring people together. I loved having my restaurant and it was an honor to be in that kind of business.
Yes. I'd say the two craziest businesses are probably, being in restaurants and nightlife and in government. They're all, around the clock and there's always one crisis or another or something going on. So after the community board, which obviously restaurants, bars, nightclub, there's a lot of interaction there. You went on, you were a commissioner of multiple agencies. Can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Definitely. So I served as commissioner of the Department of Consumer Affairs starting in 2014. It's really interesting because I can remember my first day there like it was yesterday. The Department of Consumer Affairs, and I had firsthand experience dealing with them when I owned my restaurant, they were known as an enforcement agency. The inspectors had jackets that said, enforcement, inspector, really it was sort of a scary prospect. And so they would come into your business and, they would generally come in, as you know, like the Department of Health during lunch hour. So if you're a restaurant and market like we were, that lunch hour is very, very busy, but Consumer Affairs would come into the market. And so I thought, we really need to change the approach that agency has to small businesses. So I instituted our small business relief package, which basically was approximately 25 reforms aimed at lowering fines on small businesses. So for example, we gave small businesses the opportunity to cure the violation within 30 days before ever getting a fine, as long as, of course, it wasn't a major safety violation. But assuming it wasn't, we thought, well, let's give small businesses the opportunity to cure it. I started sending inspectors out to meet with small businesses with no inspection, just to kind of go through the checklist. Look, these are the types of things we're going to be looking for. So it gave the opportunity for small businesses to start to comply more in advance. And so that's some of the work I'm very proud of. And then I served as Commissioner of Consumer Affairs when we morphed the agency from Consumer Protection protection to consumer and worker protection. So now the agency is known as DCWP,
Yes.
the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection.
Yeah, I remember it was great. We worked on that together, the reducing fines, because that's something that we've always said is, government should focus on education and compliance first and levying penalties as a last resort.
Exactly.
If something doesn't pose an immediate hazard to the public or to workers, teach them why it's a problem, how to fix it, and give them an opportunity to cure it. And I think, and I forget the number in millions of dollars, but it was just the sign violations alone by allowing a warning or cure period saved like millions and millions of dollars in fines for small businesses.
Millions of dollars, because those sign violations, if one word in the sign was not right, they were getting socked with these enormous fines. It was so silly. Or a bodega, if one can of peas had the wrong price, then every single can of peas, it was very difficult for them to comply and to have to pay those kinds of fines. So what we really tried to do is do a good faith effort. If it wasn't a safety violation, let's work with the business and give them 30 days to fix it before ever going to the fine.
Yeah. Oh, I'm getting all these memories now. I think we also did the first training together for paid sick leave when it became law. I remember we had like hundreds of business
I remember
owners.
that because when the paid sick leave law went into effect, there were so many small businesses who were saying, look, this is going to kill us. It's going to mean that we're going to have to fire people. And we said, no, that we don't think that, with all due respect, we don't think that that's the case. We're going to make sure, first of all, to your point, to educate small businesses. We're not going to go out and willy-nilly start fining on day one. We're going to work with businesses, educate them. We did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of seminars of different events. I knew we did events for the Hospitality Alliance, first making sure all the small businesses knew what the law said, what they needed to do to follow it.
I think one of the things that I remember about that, the rollout of that law compared to others, was there was a really robust campaign to let employers and workers and others know about it. Because so often you hear small business owners, like some law or rule is passed somewhere and they have no idea about it. But that was like a real campaign where, you went out to the business community. We worked together to obviously let them know what to do, how to do it, when they have to do it. And
it was multilingual because normally most of these council laws are in about 8 to 9 languages. I made the decision to disseminate the paid sick leave as in 26 languages, which is sort of unheard of for a commissioner. When I first proposed it, people thought, well, no, why would we do that? That's crazy. But my view of it was you've got so many small businesses and so many workers who would not know about it if we did not do that. And now that's become more of a model. Like on the census, we did the same thing.
Absolutely. And especially in the restaurant industry that's so diverse. So I want to get into some kind of more recent public policy, but then you were at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, MOME, which also at that time housed what was then the new Office of Nightlife.
Yes. Well, that really happened. I had gone to Amsterdam for a conference to see the Office of Nightlife because they had hired what I believe was one of the first night mayors. And so I went there to basically see what they were doing and how we could support the nightlife industry, and was very excited about this idea. And so I had the honor of actually hiring the first night mayor of New York City, Ariel Palitz. And let me tell you, a lot of people applied for that job. Everyone wanted to be the night mayor. It was, we had hundreds and hundreds of resumes. I think some of the people, quite frankly, who applied didn't truly understand what the, they thought they'd be out at night having fun.
Because everybody called it the nightlife mayor.
Exactly.
Like, who doesn't want to be the nightlife mayor of New York City?
Exactly. But it really, I think, made a difference because we really focused on the economic engine that is the nightlife industry, making sure that we're cutting through red tape, making sure that we're cutting through bureaucracy. And so it was housed originally in the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment, where I was commissioner. Ultimately, I did a bill to move that entity, the Mayor's Office of Nightlife, to Small Business Services, just because I think it made more sense that it be housed there. So it's now under SBS.
Yeah, no, that was huge. I mean, we had been talking even before we had the Hospitality Alliance, when we used to have the Nightlife Association, we were talking about that model. And then with then council member, this is so funny how it all comes full circle. Then council member Raphael Espinal, I talked with him about the idea, and he said, "Oh, I want to do a bill to create it." And now Raphael Espinal is actually the commissioner of MOME. Obviously, the Office of Nightlife isn't still there; it's at the Small Business Services. But it's interesting how it's all connected in that way. So before we talk about some of the more recent reforms related to outdoor dining and helping to streamline the permit permanent licensing process. I just want to talk a little bit about, the council and the speaker and that role again, because, most people know elections. You go, you vote for your city council member. But being elected speaker is a little bit different because the general public's not electing you. Your colleagues are, which I think says a lot to anyone, one, who's going to run for that position, and then two, who ultimately is, elected and selected, by their colleagues. So why did you want that? Because obviously it's a big role, and you not only represent your city council district, but you're helping marshal forward the council as a body. What was like the interest?
What was the motivation? Well, I love the city council. I have incredible colleagues. It's been an honor to serve in the city council along with my colleagues, and I really felt that at this time we had an opportunity for many of us, about 41 of us, it's our last 4 years in the city council. And so I know, particularly for my colleagues and for myself, there's a lot that we want to be able to get done. And so a number of council members encouraged me to run for speaker, and I appreciated that they did that. And after thinking about it, I decided, I'm going to put my hat in the ring. And I was honored to be selected.
It's very exciting. What have you learned? I mean, that journey, because, you're going to all these different neighborhoods around the city. Obviously you're so focused, as I said, on your own district, but you must have just learned so much about different neighborhoods. There's obviously the overarching issues that are important to everyone, but then there's probably just community specific issues.
Absolutely. But I think also that's a unique experience that I brought to bear because I had served as Commissioner of Consumer Affairs for the city, because I'd served as Commissioner of Media and Entertainment, both of which are citywide positions, and because I'd served as the city's 2020 Census Director, where really I was in every single neighborhood across the city of New York. So I think as I was speaking with colleagues and as I was talking to them about the priorities of their communities, that's something that I did have, I think, unique experience because for many, many years I had been doing that work.
It's really incredible. One of the things usually if I have a restaurateur, chef or someone, I always talk about leadership lessons. What have they learned and what do they try to, a lot comes up about mentorship and just, leadership and obviously leading a large body with a lot of different opinions and a lot of different interests. Yeah. What have you learned just over your years at different agencies? Even going back to running the restaurant.
I use my restaurant experience all the time.
Sorry, I heard you on Errol Lewis on his podcast, and I loved it recently. And you said something about your office and running a restaurant. Yeah,
because when I started in the city council and I met with our team who was serving in the council office, I said, you have to view constituent services just like you would view going into a restaurant or going into a diner and ordering a burger. And if you go into a diner and you order a burger and that burger is 2 hours late, you are never going back to that diner ever again. And it's the same thing with constituent services. People want to hear from you. Again, it doesn't mean we're going to solve the problem in 24 hours because we're not, but at least endeavor to try your best to answer the constituent emails and calls as quickly as you possibly can and make sure that everyone is heard and that you're trying to address those issues. So to me, that's what customer service is all about. And I think people get frustrated with government because they get frustrated if they feel their concerns are not being addressed. And so city government, I love city government because it's visceral. The things that as you're walking down the street, those are the issues we can hopefully solve. I've never served on the state or federal level, so I can't really comment on that, but it just strikes me the city officials were usually the front line. The council member is usually the first place that constituents oftentimes go to. They might have an issue with a city agency. So I love that. I love that ability to try to solve people's problems. To me, that's why I'm in this business, and that's what I really like to do. Yeah,
it is interesting. I mean, it is similar in the sense of a restaurant. You are on the ground with people as they're experiencing their restaurant experience. Same way a constituent would be experienced just walking down the street and what's happening around them. And you are very responsive to those immediate needs where, Congress and others may be focusing on some of these other big picture issues. It's I have an issue with, the pothole, the sidewalk, the this, so I can't, small business owners. I know because I've had many small business owners, they call me about some problem or some permanent license. And I'm like, oh, well, where's the business? And it's in your district. And they're like, they call your office and they say, you're responsive. And I think that's part of it. And I even feel that from a membership association perspective. We have a business owner that reaches out and has a problem, and like, we may not be able to just solve their issue right away, but at least if you can respond, acknowledge them, and do whatever you can to try to help them, I think that goes a long way. And many times you can help them in many different ways. And
that's obviously the goal that we endeavor to accomplish.
Yeah.
But it's about service delivery. That is the bread and butter of what we do, particularly in our district office. Now, in the speaker's office, we're also dealing with constituent delivery, but oftentimes on a larger scale. You're seeing patterns and practices that are happening on a particular issue that are cross-cutting across numerous different neighborhoods. So then maybe that means we need new legislation. We need some kind of oversight hearing because maybe a particular agency is not doing what they should be doing. So that's really what I like to do. And I enjoy city service tremendously.
That's great. So then what is the dynamic as far as like, with the mayor's office and the different agencies? Because obviously the council holds oversight hearings into agencies. How does that dynamic work? What are things that you're looking at? I feel like someone, especially you, who's gone through, owning business, a lawyer, multiple agencies, like the idea of good government or efficient government is important. So I don't know if you're a check is the right word, or you have an oversight responsibility, but how do you view that role?
I think it's all of the above. The checks and balances are really important. I used to teach as an adjunct professor at Columbia, where I taught a class called When Cities Take the Lead, which is all about how city government, particularly when the federal government is deregulating, has the obligation and real opportunity to get involved and to lead. In terms of city agencies, again, for a lot of constituents, their frustration starts to build on particular issues if they're not being heard. So outdoor dining is a really good example of it. We just passed this whole panoply of different outdoor dining bills, which I'm so excited about. And we made outdoor dining once again year round, which is so incredibly important. But at the same time, we listen to constituents who are saying, well, I love outdoor dining, but I don't love rats. And I love outdoor dining, but I'm upset if there's sanitation issues. So we passed a bill in the package that deals with just that issue. And so again, when the agencies are testifying in front of us, so the Department of Transportation, I was a critic of outdoor dining going to the Department of Transportation, mainly because I don't think a transit agency should be running outdoor dining. I thought we should move it back to my old agency, to the Department of Consumer and Worker Protection, which has years of experience doing sidewalk cafe licenses. But that would have been a rather heavy lift. So first, I wanted to make sure we're passing this package of bills, and then we'll see if we need to move agencies or not. But again, with the Department of Transportation, we heard from so many restaurant owners who were incredibly frustrated because they would apply for the permit, but it would take months and months and months, and it was very expensive. And yet for really basically only able to utilize it for 6 months a year. So those are the things that we really tried to fix.
And I think that's also being responsive. I mean, we heard and we obviously, communicated it to you and your colleagues in the council, like with the roadway dining for many restaurants, particularly smaller restaurants in neighborhoods across the 5 boroughs. They just said, I cannot afford to pay to set up my roadway cafe, pay again to break it down, then pay to store it for 4 months over the winter, only to pay again to set it back up again. Became cost prohibitive. So one of the bills that you passed recently will allow an option for a year-round winterized sidewalk cafe, or the quarterly payments. I know your colleague, Thomas Henry, who's the chair of small business, passed a bill to allow restaurants to pay the consent fees in quarterly payments.
Which makes a real difference. And that's important. I mean, we need to make it easier for small businesses. So many small businesses closed in the past year. I read a statistic that more small businesses closed this past year than opened. I mean, that's shocking. And so we really need to make sure we're getting to the bottom of it. Why are these businesses closing? What can we as a city of New York do to support them? I mean, what we haven't talked about is marketing and promotion. I really think the city has for years missed an opportunity to better market and promote small businesses. And by that, I mean NYC & Co. Well, what was formerly NYC & Co., now the Visitors and Conventions Bureau. But I used to serve on their executive board. And certainly after 9/11, there was a lot of work we did to promote businesses right here in New York City. And so I think we could be doing more of that.
I agree. That's something, I'm on the board, NYC Tourism and Conventions. One of the things we always talk about, is obviously how do we help and promote the city. And there's so much incredible stuff going on, and it's really just having the resources to come down and make sure we're helping to tell those stories,
Right.
help engage people to get them to go out and eat at, the small neighborhood restaurant in whatever neighborhood it
Yeah.
is, kind of get out of just, Manhattan's core. Yes, we want people to go eat,
Of
in Manhattan,
course.
but we want people to really go and explore all the incredible restaurants that we
Yeah.
have, in neighborhoods around the city. And I think it's a combination of, like you said, it's the promotion, it's the policy, the other outdoor dining bill, Councilmember Brewers are letting the sidewalk cafes
Mhm.
be enclosed during the winter months,
Right.
which is another thing that's so sensible. It's
Yeah.
like the restaurant's paying year round for this license.
Exactly.
Why should they not be able to utilize it to help sustain jobs?
Of
People
course.
keep their jobs throughout the winter, more places for people to sit, and more revenue that small business can generate, which is what
Right.
everyone says they want. Let's help support our local small businesses. So
Exactly.
I think as a package, it really, really helps.
Good. I'm so glad to hear that. We
Yes.
worked really hard on the
I know
package,
you
and we
did.
tried to move it through in record time.
It was amazing. I
Which-
think 7 months or
Yeah.
so. That's, the one other thing we need is like a temporary license, because I think it's still taking too long to apply and get the license.
Yeah, they have the conditional license, but not the
Yeah,
a slightly more temporary one. So we're happy to
Yeah.
look at that to see what we can do about it.
Yeah.
But I think really the other thing on the marketing and promotion is also the business improvement districts, the bids,
Yes.
because when in the last administration, and I was small business chair in the
Yes, you
council,
are.
I pushed really hard to have a grant program for small bids that had a budget of $500,000 or less, which are many of the
Yeah.
bids. And so we were able to allocate significant sums to those smaller bids to use for marketing promotion so that then they could market and promote the restaurants and other businesses in their area.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many, and that's the other thing too, is like they have the resource to do it. There are so many great places, on this show and just kind of going out, doing my work. And I know you're going around, going into different neighborhoods.
Yeah.
You see how many just great local restaurants there are, and they have such amazing stories as well. I mean, that's one of the things that I love about, the work that I do in this show is just like being able to talk to people about like the history and the story of, their business. I mean, when you think about your cafe, obviously it's a very, upsetting story. But it's also a story of, resilience, as well, which is a powerful and a beautiful thing. But so many of these businesses have such deep roots in their communities and, mean so much. They're more than just like where transactions. And
of course, you pour
happen.
your heart and soul when a small business owner,
Yeah.
and I felt this way myself when I had the idea to do my small business. You come up with your idea, and then you literally pour your heart and soul. I say this as a mother; it's like giving birth. You're
Yeah.
birthing this new entity, and then you have to care for it, and it is, at 24/7.
Yeah.
You're doing, any small business owner will tell you that you're doing like just a million different things at once.
Truly. I know one of the things that you've been talking a lot about, and you mentioned actually in another context when we started the conversation, was insurance.
Mhm.
I think both, you've seen it kind of on the just personal side, but you've
Yeah.
obviously seen it in the commercial side. And we hear from so many restaurants, but particularly bars and nightclubs, how they've seen their insurance premiums
Mhm.
skyrocket.
Right.
And it's complicated. I've tried to kind of wrap my head around all the different factors of why they've gone up. And, there's multiple reasons. But can you talk a little bit about what your initiative
Definitely.
is and
Yeah.
how you're thinking about addressing?
Well, 2 years ago, I passed a bill in the council to create the nation's first Office of Healthcare Accountability, which is now up and running at the Department of Health. And that office lists the price of every single medical procedure, every surgery, every medical procedure at every New York City hospital, because price transparency works to lower costs. So I thought, well, if we could do this for healthcare, and we saved the city a lot of money through that new office, perhaps we could do this through insurance. And then when I started digging through the data, I learned that small businesses in New York are spending 4 to 5 times the national average on liability insurance.
Yeah.
It's absolutely shameful. And in other categories as well, car insurance is 52% higher in New York than in other areas. Homeowners insurance at 26% higher. But for small businesses, this is something that we can work to lower it. So my bill, which we just passed, creates the nation's first Office of Insurance Affordability. And basically, it is going to work on price transparency around insurance. And they're also going to be claims adjusters who are there to help small businesses and New Yorkers navigate various insurance claims.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we need everything we can do there because I hear from so many business owners, for example, their risk hasn't changed. Their risk today is the same that it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But because the premium is calculated on their sales, well, inflation and everything else have meant that they've increased their prices.
Right.
They may not be more profitable, but they're generating more sales, which means higher premiums that they're paying.
Right.
So they're paying more. The risk hasn't changed, and it's a huge problem.
It's a huge problem, and so this new office is going to be up and running soon, and it'll work to hopefully by shining a light on how much small businesses are paying for the insurance. When you start to see those discrepancies, that type of price transparency actually does work. You're shining a light on that practice, and then that type of competition can work to lower the prices, as it did with our healthcare office. So I'm really excited about this.
Great. So this is kind of a philosophical question, but I think it's also a very practical question because the businesses have an economic impact on the city. But, when you move around the city and you see all these restaurants and bars, like how do you as a policymaker view their impact on the city as a whole and like how they should be embraced?
Well, it's not trite to say that the small businesses are the backbone of our city, like you were saying in the beginning of the program. They really are. And there are thousands and thousands of small businesses in every single neighborhood all across New York. And we have an attendant duty as city government to try to make it easier for them to own and operate. So whether that means lowering fines or whether it means I passed a bill a couple of years ago to create a one-stop shop portal for licenses and permits. And we could even take that farther than what the last administration did on that. Or my colleague, Councilmember Zhuang, passed a bill a few weeks ago called Cut the Red Tape to make it easier for new small businesses to open up, because we were hearing from some small businesses that were waiting 1 to 2 years to open up. That is unconscionable. We cannot have that. So as we're thinking about policy, I'm always thinking about small businesses. What can we do to make it easier for them to own and operate and to make sure that they don't close? One simple thing, and I've been thinking a lot about this, is again, with the health department doing that inspection oftentimes in the middle of service. That's super problematic. So I have been thinking about that, and I think we do need to do something about it because it's just putting so much of a burden on these restaurants at the time when they least can handle it.
Yeah, and that goes back to kind of the same theme of what we were talking about before, how if something doesn't pose, an immediate hazard to the health, you could totally conduct a health department inspection in a restaurant, ensure high food safety standards, but reduce many of those, burdens.
Yeah.
So it's doable. I think it's come down to, political will, which clearly there's political will to do stuff to help the restaurant industry and, the city at large from the recent, outdoor dining bills. The other one, your colleague, you mentioned about kind of the streamlining of the permitting and licensing. And part of that, I think, is just like the tech stack too that needs to be worked on. You open up a bank account or any type of account, you can, log into a dashboard, you see the status of everything, you see where it is, how it's moving. So much of the stuff is still super antiquated, and you're like, just bringing it into modern times, the city infrastructure would be extraordinarily helpful.
Exactly. Those are the common sense things that I think people want to see out of their government. And that just makes sense to be able to do it. They want to have less bureaucracy, less red tape. They want things streamlined. We shouldn't just be fining small businesses when there's a picayune violation. Like, again, when there was a word and a sign that was incorrect. And so all of those things. I do think we also need to lower fines across other agencies. So not just consumer affairs, but so that's something we're looking at as well.
Yeah, I just thought you should just say, okay, we need to reduce the fines by 50% and then work backward from there instead of trying to go violation by violation, because then everyone fights about this and about that. And there's thousands of them, so you don't really end up getting very far. You just need like some overarching. They're reduced by this much, and then you figure out how to, modify from there. So other than policy, just have you ever a chance to like go out and eat? Have you had a good meal? Have you gone anywhere recently?
Yeah, I have this great new restaurant in my district, Lily's.
Okay.
I don't know if you've been there.
No, but
okay, we'll have to
All
go.
right.
It's fantastic. It's interesting. The east side of Manhattan, the district that I represent, is actually the densest council district. So there's like a lot of density, but there are a lot of restaurants and there are a lot of bars. So Lily's was a great addition. Felice opened up a wine bar on 83rd and 1st. So that's really nice because we have a lot of bars, but we don't have that many wine bars. So that I think has been a great addition.
A lot of stuff has been opening in the past couple of years on the Upper East Side, I have to say.
It's really exciting. So we're starting to see more and more new businesses open up in our district. And we really want to try to feature more small businesses. So every single month, we want to try to make sure that as a city council, we're focusing on those new businesses that are opening up or ones that have been there for a while and really try to help to highlight them. So I was at the Nourish Spot this morning.
Yes, Dawn Kelly.
Yes, and it was so great. And her story is incredibly inspiring that she had been in finance and that she lost her job and she went home and she was inconsolable, she said, for months until her daughter decided to motivate her to open up this business. And now she's at JFK and she's at Citi Field and in the schools, and it's incredible.
It's amazing. But that's that like driving entrepreneurial spirit. And Dawn is one of those people. She sits on the Hospitality Alliance board. We've become really friendly over the years that, she just always finds a way. You know what I mean? Sometimes people make excuses of like why things can't be done. I feel like she's one of those people, those spirits that just always finds a way, whatever the obstacles are, she figures out how to go around them, over and through them. And she shows up. And I think kind of going back to government and policy making, I say to a lot of small business owners who are frustrated, it's, you can't just talk about it, you have to be about it. And I think, whether it was outdoor dining or other issues, when they really reach out to their local elected representative, when they show up at hearings, when they really kind of unify to make their voice heard, because they are so important to the fabric of the city. And people want to support them. Sometimes they just need to know like how.
Exactly. I think that's really important. And for a lot of elected officials who might not come from the private sector, it's important that they're meeting with and talking directly with these small business owners so they can understand some of the travails and difficulties of owning a small business. But there are a number of council members who own small businesses. So it's exciting.
It's very cool. We need, I always think we should have more and more people like from the small business world in government, because then they really understand, they can bring that, lived experience to their policy making.
Exactly.
It's not a requirement, but it certainly is very, helpful, and also raises those issues. They're a priority. They're like, oh, these are things that I dealt with. And there's so many small business owners. And I feel like that's one of the things that makes New York so special is like the diversity of those small business owners and everything they offer. All right. What else is on the, before we finish up, what else is on the table? What are we doing policy wise? Where's the city going? We're 7 months into you being speaker.
We have so many things that we are working on. We're working on e-bikes. So we have 17 bills that we are going to be hearing on September 30th at a big hearing that's going to focus on the enforcement around e-bikes and these 17 bills that we're looking at, because there have been too many people that have been injured and sadly some killed on this e-bike issue. And so we're really going to tackle it with an aggressive way. We're also looking at pedicabs. So that's going to be another issue because the pedicab industry we've got a tremendous amount of unlicensed pedicabs operating in New York. And so for tourists who are coming here, and if they go on one of these unlicensed pedicabs, oftentimes they're being overcharged. They're not getting a particularly good experience of our great city. And so that's something that we definitely are going to be looking into as well. We're doing a whole series of bills around Black home ownership. So that's something that is going to happen in the fall, which we are going to be looking at. So we have a lot of different legislation, and affordable housing, which again, we've been doing our plans to build 100% affordable housing on top of a number of different New York City public library branches. We surveyed all 250 library branches, and we found that some of them really are suitable to build housing on top of. So I think that is going to be a very important outside of the box way that we can build more truly affordable housing in New York City.
Well, anything that we can do, obviously housing is critically important to everyone, but particularly people working in restaurants and nightlife. You have people of all ages, but I think you see often younger people that are working in restaurants and nightlife. They want to stay in New York. They want to maybe open up their own business here one day, but the cost of housing is so high. It can be really, really difficult. And sometimes if they're not originally from here, or even if they are, they end up going elsewhere where the cost of living, both living and opening a business are less. So that's a big thing. Again, even like the e-bikes and delivery, obviously restaurant delivery is quintessential New York. And I think everyone acknowledges that there's a lot going on our streets, and there needs to be a system that allows people to get their food they love quickly and, keep people employed, but obviously keeping people who use the streets safe.
It's so important. And then we're looking at childcare. We've been working on childcare issues for many, many years, trying to build new childcare facilities, trying to ease the regulatory burdens and permits that are needed, that sometimes the government agencies are siloed and it makes it more difficult for childcare facilities to get built. So we've been trying to cut down on that bureaucracy because we think that is incredibly important as well. We just launched an investigation into Polymarket, Kalshi, Coinbase, Gemini. So we're looking at those markets because we think they're targeting to minors, and that is of great concern. Some of the advertising and marketing practices we believe may be deceptive and violate the city's consumer protection law. So we're looking at that. So for any parent, these are issues that parents can care about if their child is looking at these markets and then somehow getting lured into them.
Amazing. I have 1 minute, one last question to ask you. And this goes back to kind of like the personal but professional question. And I also talk with restaurateurs about this. When I talk about working nights, weekends, holidays, stressful situations, obviously you were grappling with some really difficult, other exciting societal issues. And you have to lead this big, prominent legislative body, help navigate through all of them. How do you just personally do you meditate? Do you do something how do you just keep yourself, poised and focused and, in control? Because I feel like leaders, whether it's a small business or in politics, having some sort of process to keep yourself composed.
That would be my family, because it would be my kids who I think, and my husband, spending time with my family to me is the greatest gift. I also try to exercise. I don't get to do it every day with this job. It's really hard, but I'm an early morning person. So I'm almost always up at 5:30. And so if I can try to work out, that I think is great, because it's just my time to focus on myself and try to, it's a good stress reliever.
Great. Well, great family too, because I know them as well. And I know that they're doing exciting stuff. Julie Menin is the speaker of the New York City Council, who's been a huge advocate of the restaurant industry and so many other things that are so important to New York City. And as she said, she owned a cafe, and just keep doing what you're doing. We need advocates inside the halls of government for our city's small businesses. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
This is Hospitality and Politics, powered by the New York City Hospitality Alliance. I am Andrew Rigie, and we will see you next time.